Jack Robichaux sat up in bed. He had heard just about enough of this argument. He intended to storm off and end the conversation. The voice called out to him from the bed. "Where do you think you're going? This is an important decision, and I think we have to make it together." Jack paused mid-stride with his back facing their bed. He blew out an exasperated sigh. At times, loving Cato could be so challenging. He was insistent. He was full of life. He was like a force of nature. Loving him was like embracing an earthquake, like hugging a hurricane. He was passionate, and tended to act without thinking. At times he frustrated Jack beyond belief, but it was this personality that he fell in love with in the first place. He always made such rash decisions, and now he wanted Jack to dive into another one of his misadventures head on, alongside him. They had both gotten the news at the same time. They had both snuck out of a party early. Cato was in one of his moods and couldn't be enticed to have fun despite being surrounded by all of his friends. He didn't tell Jack directly to leave, but he was the master of letting him know, passively. He acted melancholic the whole time, and eventually Jack relented, and they slipped out and away from the festivities. Cato always seemed to get his way if he persisted long enough. It was while they were listening to the radio on the car ride home that they first heard the news report about the emerging black hole. Cato's reaction had been almost instantaneous after they confirmed that it wasn't some sort of twisted prank. It took him only minutes to process the inevitability of their demise. He suggested that they opt out and save themselves the panic and turmoil of their impending and inescapable fate. He spoke like he wanted Jack to swerve off the road and go careening off a cliff. Jack was always the voice of reason and rationality to Cato's ephemeral and emotional side. It was why they worked so well together. They argued about it all the way home, and took the argument through the front doors of their modest house. For the next couple of days, it was all they did together. They argued, bickered, and quarreled about what to do. Cato wanted to go out side by side before the end came to greet them, and Jack wanted to wait and see what was going to happen. Cato's voice called out to him. "We have to talk about this. You have to listen." Jack snapped with his back still turned to him. "You mean I have to agree with you? That is what you always mean. You aren't looking for someone to discuss things. You just want someone to acquiesce to you. It isn't happening this time. I'm not your soldier to bark orders at." Cato pled. "Please, Jack, come back. Sit with me a while longer. I need you." Jack slouched slightly before he spoke in a softer voice. "This isn't right." Cato asked. "Come back to bed. We can discuss this just a little while longer. It's not like we have all the time in the world to hash this out." Jack cracked a smile. Regardless of how infuriating he could be, Cato really knew his dark sense of humor. They clicked on a level that some of their married coupled friends couldn't even achieve. The man in the bed spoke again. "We can make it so quick. You still have that pistol from your time in the Gulf War. You keep that thing in such good shape. You could make it quick." His voice dropped to a whisper as he crooned, "Bang, easy and quick. We can get away from this." Jack whirled on him and shouted, "No, I'm not running. I'm not shooting myself in the head just because you want to die side by side like this were a goddamn soap opera." Cato stared at him with unmoving, unblinking eyes. Jack always felt naked under his stare. Even now, loving him was a trying and rewarding experience, but in this moment, Jack only felt pity. He was scared. They both were scared, but for different reasons. Cato didn't want to live anymore. He had been depressed long before the announcement. He was afraid of dying alone. Jack was afraid of being left alone. He remembered how Cato had been with him through thick and thin. He supported him when he decided that it was time to do his civic duty and enlist. He had returned from the Gulf War with more baggage than he had originally left with. He remembered Cato wrapping himself around him in a hug so tight he thought he might crumble in on himself when he had woken up late in the night, screaming. He remembered the dreams of fields engulfed in flame, belching black smoke up into the sky like it were a tableau from a depiction of the hellish apocalypse. He remembered the sudden shock that came from a stray bullet opening one of his friend's throats at the base. Cato had been with him through the ups and downs. Cato's voice broke through the fog of memories. "Please, Jack. I don't want to be alone. You have to do this for me." He had been by his side for everything he had been through, and Jack tried to be by his side when Cato's mental state started to decline. He tried to stay and listen when his talk of suicide became more detailed, darker. It was now something more than a passing fancy. It was something real and desired. It was a pretty noose that he kept pulling tighter and tighter around both their necks. Jack approached the bed and tried to talk, but found it difficult as his eyes had already started to water up and his lips had already begun to quiver. Cato spoke first. He knew what was coming. "Don't." Jack sank to his knees and began to weep. His hand reached up on the bed and grasped Cato's hand in his. Jack spoke through choking sobs. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I wasn't there for you. I'm sorry that this happened." He pressed Cato's hand to his face and nuzzled it. He didn't care about the mess. He wanted to be close to him one last time. There was no warmth to be felt in his tenderness. Jack croaked, "I'm sorry that I can't do this for you." He had done it while he was asleep. He turned the hand over and planted a kiss where the wrist intersected with the hand. He had cut so deep, and probably bled out in minutes. Jack spoke. "I'm sorry. I can't join you." The corpse spoke. Jack knew he was dead, but that didn't make it any less real. "You bastard! You are abandoning me. When I need you the most, you are leaving me. I need you here by my side. I need you to embrace the end with me. You are leaving me." Jack snapped. He didn't care who heard him shouting. "No! You abandoned me! You couldn't face the end, and so you fled from it! Did you expect that what we did last night would be an adequate goodbye? I thought we were making up, making love like we used to. I thought we were getting better. Now you're gone, and I can't stay here with the reminder of what you used to be, taunting me." Jack stood up, and the voice of his lover screamed, "Don't leave me! Don't leave me! Don't—" Jack Robichaux left the corpse of Cato behind in the bedroom. There was nothing left in the house for him. Jack knew he had cracked, hearing the disembodied voice of his lover screaming after him. But he was past the point of caring. He stepped out onto his porch and faced the day. The sky was almost completely black. He knew it was just his imagination, but he felt like it was pulling him towards the sky. Chances were, when the end did come, he wouldn't even be aware of it. There would be a sudden moment of shock, and then it would be over, like a bullet to the throat. Jack walked out onto the street and ignored the world raging around him. Cato's voice had completely died out, but he sincerely doubted that it was gone for good. It would probably speak to him at the very end. It would probably screech at him from oblivion, damning him for not greeting the end together. But that was on Cato, and not Jack. He spoke aloud once again. "You could have stayed with me. We could have seen the end together. You could have stayed with me. We could have seen the end together. We could have held each other as the darkness grew around us. You're going to miss all of it because you gave up. I am not going to do the same." Jack continued to walk as the sky grew darker around him. He didn't have much time left, but in the time he did have, he would try to live.